Thank you, Brittany, and good morning. I'm excited to moderate the House District 54 remarks. We would like to welcome uncontested incumbent Republican candidate Matt Soper to the stage. Thank you for joining us this morning, Matt, and thank you so much for your willingness to serve Western Colorado. With that, we're going to begin with opening remarks. Representative Soper, you have 3 minutes to give us your opening remarks.
Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate everyone being here this morning, and I'm glad to see a full room this morning because I was kind of worried that if you had the first two debates that were uncontested, maybe there'd only be 2 or 3 people in the audience. So this is actually more people than when we had a very robust debate 2 years ago. But I do want to say it's been the honor of a lifetime to represent House District 54 in the Colorado House of Representatives. Over the last 6 years, I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish. Everything from reforming the Colorado funeral industry to require licensure, transparency, reining in body brokers to address what happened at Sunset Mesa and Penrose has been a great accomplishment. Also, Colorado was the only state in which we didn't have the word consent in our definition of rape and sexual assault. And I'm proud to have run several bills that completely rewrote our sexual assault statute here in Colorado to guarantee that we have better conviction rates for those who choose to engage in rape. We've also strengthened the laws on those who prey on our children. I still remember back in 2019, when then Representative Rankin moved over to the Senate, he said, "Matt, I have a bill I wondered if you would continue in the House." And it concerned when a teacher was sexting with a student. Under our current statutes at the time, law enforcement was unable to build a case unless there was video evidence. So we wanted to make sure that words could also suffice to building that case. Well, this was not an easy bill, and that was a very valuable lesson in the legislature. There's no such thing as an easy bill, but without the help of Senator Zinzinger, we never would have gotten that through to the governor's desk. Working in a bipartisan nature has also meant that Western Colorado has benefited, whether it's been protecting our water, being able to ensure that we have transportation dollars over here, or other critical infrastructure, such as improving our cell phones, which currently I'm on an interim cell phone connectivity committee. And that stemmed from a constituent who said to me a couple of years ago, "Matt, none of the high schools in Delta County have cell phone coverage. What happens if an emergency happens there?" Same thing was true with the hospital, no cell phone coverage. So right now, we have a committee, we've been traveling the state, and we've been looking at how to improve cell phone coverage in rural Colorado. And that's what I believe representation is all about, is looking at problems and seeing what we can collectively do to solve those problems and find solutions that we can all come together on. And I hope to continue to deliver on those if I'm lucky enough to go back to Denver for a 4th term. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Soper. We'll now move to the question and answer portion of the debate. We have 4 questions that were submitted by Club 20 members and our partners. You will have 3 minutes to respond to each question. The first question is, what are the 3 biggest issues facing District 54, and what will you do to address those issues?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. House District 54 is a very rural district. We have a lot of farmers and agriculture. So the biggest threat really for us is downstream interests who are wanting to take our water, and front range interests who are wanting to take our water. Safeguarding the Colorado River and the Shoshone rights for us to be able to deliver on our obligations under the 1922 Compact is probably one of the biggest issues of our generation facing House District 54 and all of Western Colorado. The other really big issues are infrastructure. Right now, Western Colorado infrastructure is aging. Whether it's water delivery infrastructure or roads. Tell me you haven't hit a pothole and I'll sell you oceanfront property in Mesa County. We also have been ignored with some things when it comes to cell phone build out. There's areas of House District 54, believe it or not, that still have dial-up internet. They don't even have broadband. So being able to still get critical infrastructure to parts of House District 54 is also one of those top areas that we still need to deliver on as a state. And then healthcare. House District 54 is a district that's getting older. We have a large baby boomer population. And we need to ensure that we keep our hospitals to where they are sustainable moving into the future. And right now, the pressure that is on our hospitals by insurance, by the federal government, even by the state government through changes in policy has made it very, very difficult to operate a hospital. And it's also made it unfair to patients because the pressure that is placed on a hospital through regulatory burdens means that those costs get passed on to the patient. And the worst thing in the world is for an individual to be saddled with medical debt. That's the last thing an individual needs to have. We want them to focus on recovering, getting better, being able to live their life, add to the economy, and that's truly important. So those probably would be really the top three issues as I would see it. But looking out across the horizon, there's always risks that we see, such as our farmers and ranchers constantly have the risk, whether it's from farm labor legislation or drought shortages. And those are things that we're always constantly thinking about, okay, how can we navigate those troubled waters?
Thank you, and you segued beautifully into question number 2. Recent agriculture labor laws have increased many costs for farmers, which could result in an inability to remain competitive with other states that are agricultural producers. What could you do to address this issue and ensure that Colorado continues to produce food for our tables?
No, thank you. That's a great question. To set a little more context, a couple years ago, the Colorado General Assembly passed a farm labor bill which capped the number of hours that farm laborers can work without having overtime. It's now moved to 40 hours, and then you have up to 40 hours a week, and then up to 20 hours that you could be paid overtime, and then that person would not be allowed to work any longer. The problem is when crops are coming ripe during the harvest season, you have about 6 to 8 weeks to harvest, and that's it in Colorado. And so either you hire more people as a farmer, but then that cuts into what already is a limited profit margin that you have. Most farmers actually are not making any money. They actually are constantly losing money. And it's also not really good for the farm worker. Many are H-2A workers that come from south of the border up here. They want to work really hard for a short period of time and have as much cash in their back pocket as possible to take back home to where they live. And they want to be able to expand either their own personal farm, many of them are farmers as well, but they also want to ensure that they have enough money to be able to send their kids to college. The number of H-2A workers that I've visited with, and I've picked corn alongside a lot of them as well, for many of you who don't know, for 6 years I was in the Olathe sweet corn business, picking corn for farmers, including that of Representative Mark Catlin and his father. And I can tell you that each one of them told me about their dream, which is they could make a lot of money here in the United States, here in Colorado, and they could send their kids to college, to an American college, and they knew that their lot in life over the long course would be improved, that they would be able to live a better life in Mexico, but they would also be able to ensure that their kids could live a better life because they would be able to go on to college. Onto the farm labor bill, it's cost farmers a lot. Many farmers have scaled back, which has certainly hurt Colorado. There's a legal concept called the Dormant Commerce Clause and the Privileges and Immunities Clause of Article 4 of the federal Constitution. And what those collectively say is we as a state can't treat out-of-state citizens worse than our own. However, there's nothing in that legal concept that talks about that we can't treat our own citizens worse than those in other states. And that's currently what we're doing. So our farmers are now at a strategic disadvantage to other neighboring states, which means it's more expensive to sell Colorado farm products into the grocery stores like Kroger and Albertsons than a farmer in Utah, New Mexico, or even the Midwest. That means we're punishing our farmers, but we're also punishing our Colorado brand, and it's unfair.
Thank you. And you also touched on this next subject in your opening remarks, but perhaps you can expand on your thoughts. Here's the question. What are your thoughts on Colorado's healthcare system? What are your plans to improve access, reduce costs, especially to rural areas of the state, and ensure that costs are truly managed, not just moved to different players in the system? What can be done to protect rural hospitals and the delivery of quality care?
Well, thank you. There's a lot of moving parts in that question. I love rural healthcare, mainly because of how complex the topic is. And I believe the more complex a problem is, that it needs an equally complex solution in a way, but you can chip at it. I mean, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? We, a couple of years ago, were able to pass a hospital transparency bill because one question is, why is healthcare so much more expensive in Colorado than other states? And as lawmakers, we actually really didn't have the data. So the first thing I said is we need to be able to gather the data. Is money really leaving Colorado to go to other parts of the nation from these large multi-state hospital conglomerates? Or is it staying in Colorado, or are we seeing money coming in from other states to Colorado? And why is it that hospital construction is so much more in Colorado than other states? So passing this really big transparency bill has helped us start to identify a few things that have gone on in Colorado. We're still tracking what that data shows us. In addition to that, I have thought a lot about what can rural hospitals do to be able to push back, but yet also be able to offer affordable health care. One thing rural hospitals need to be able to do is to pool all of the claim denials against an insurer so that they can make that as one claim, almost like a class action. Because the problem that happens right now with insurance is they will nickel and dime a hospital by having many different claim denials, and you have to get on a phone with your hospital's doctor, or the patient's doctor, the hospital attorney. Then on the other end of the phone is the insurance attorney and the doctor for the insurance company. And they'll quibble over $1,000. But yet, within the hour that they're quibbling, that doctor could have probably been billing the same for the hospital system. And at some point in time, you're going to say, well, maybe it's better to just write that off. But you can't write off everything in rural health care. Otherwise, very quickly, you would not even have a hospital or a clinic left. You have to have some money in the system to be able to operate. And being able to pool those claims together would mean that instead of sitting there quibbling about each $1,000 segment of the bill, you could collectively talk about the systematic denial rates. And that certainly would be a game changer for rural hospitals. The other thing would be having better reimbursement rates from Medicaid. Right now, as many people went off of Medicaid, at least those were payers. Now that we have fewer people on Medicaid, it means that we have a certain segment of individuals coming into hospitals that are just not payers within the system. And that also makes it hard. I'd rather have someone paying a few cents than nothing at all.
Thank you. And now for our last question. How have you seen equity being accomplished between the urban and rural parts of our state, if at all? And what does equity across the state look like to you? And what strategies could you implement to get us closer to true equity?
Oh, that's another really good question. I think a lot about equity. I think about the phrase on the U.S. Supreme Court building that says, equal justice under the law. And I also think about, what does that actually mean? Well, we were fortunate enough to get a bill passed during the special session to ensure that agricultural equipment used to plant, harvest, or grow inside a controlled environment agricultural facility, or a greenhouse, is treated the same for property tax purposes as the exact same equipment that you would use outside. That would be equity. Another form of equity would be, last summer we had Representative Jennifer Bacon out in my district for the Peach Fest. And she made a comment that you have really bad cell phone coverage out here. And I said, yeah, it's a real problem. And she said, it's a problem at her home too, in Denver. And I went, oh, really? I thought Denver had, everything. And she said, no, not at all, that we have some of the same problems. And that was that light bulb moment when you realize that equity actually can be the same thing. We both didn't have critical infrastructure that we believed is necessary for a 21st century society to operate, and that we as legislators could actually come up with an idea to try to solve this problem. I mean, we came up with a study committee because we knew we weren't experts, and we recruited the best in the industry to be part of the committee as well. But we certainly looked at that, and that's also equity, to say that it's a similar problem between rural Colorado and urban Colorado. Similarly enough, as we're talking about water and what we can do as far as irrigation and safeguarding our water, well, we have a legal duty to supply a certain number of acre feet every single year to downstream states. But being able to do this means that we also need to have the Front Range take their fair share to ensure that they're not using most of their water for ornamentals or for lawn or landscaping. And to understand that equity also means the balance between giving up a little bit in ornamentals so that we can also still have some water to grow the food that Coloradans deserve and want to grow as well, so that we can also live a healthy and productive lives. I also believe equity in terms of healthcare means that no matter where you live in Colorado, you should have access to the same high-quality doctors, the same high-quality equipment, and that you know that the same care is going to be the same. And we can easily accomplish that. We just can't let rural Colorado be left behind.
Thank you for your thoughtful remarks this morning in answering each of these questions. As we wrap up, we would love to hear your final thoughts. So you have 3 minutes for closing remarks.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone listening this morning. I do want to say that serving in the legislature has been the honor of a lifetime, and perhaps this might be my last Club 20 debate up here in front of everyone, going into my 4th term. I will say that I have sat back over the years and observed some structural changes that need to be made to the legislature as well. Some problems that I believe could definitely improve the future of Colorado. One of those is a change in law to be able to see a certain number of days, whether it's 30 days or 2 weeks, between the first reading of a bill and the first committee hearing of a bill. Most states, other than Colorado, have such a requirement, and that's to give both members and the public the opportunity to read legislation that's being debated and considered. Another change that I've thought about, especially as I've met legislators from other states, is what has the effect of term limits been over the last number of years? I had my aides do a comprehensive study this year of term limits, and what we found is the average tenure of a member of the state house is 3 years, and the average tenure of a member of the state senate is 4 years here in Colorado, which means that term limits no longer have effects of really limiting people in office. But it does still have an effect, because term limits shifted institutional knowledge to the lobby and to special interest groups and to the governor. And it means that the legislature no longer has the power and the leverage that the people expect from the members they send to represent them. We should probably look at whether or not we extend that duration or abolish term limits altogether. I've looked at other states such as Texas or Montana where there are none, and what you see is the legislature is very strong, and that's what I believe the people expect. You also have those members that would have the institutional knowledge to tell the person who's only going to be there for 2 or 3 years, we've tried that, we've litigated that issue, please don't try it again. The problem with the modern General Assembly here in Colorado is a member who knows they're only going to serve a very short period of time wants to have major legislation that they can put their name on, that they can build a legacy on. And the problem is, when we work so hard to try to amend or even defeat certain bills, only to see 4 years, 6 years later, the exact same bill come back becomes really frustrating for the people of Colorado, because we work really hard as lawmakers. And I also want to say, Coloradans do expect us to be leaders. They expect us to be able to walk across the aisle and to talk to the other side, but to hang on to our principles as well. And we need to balance both of that. Thank you, and I appreciate your time.